welcome to the Monday Smash, regular time and regular place here on Warchant TV. This is the Monday Smash presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis on Warchant TV. Hit the like button as you enter into the program. He's managing editor of Warchant.com. He is Ira Schofel. My name is Tom Lang. And tonight we welcome you to an edition where we are getting back to normalcy a little bit. We will be touching on the things that happened, specifically a tragic thing that happened on campus here in Tallahassee in just a couple of moments here on the Monday Smash. And we welcome you all in as you're filing in. We know that the top story that people are thinking about right now as it pertains to Florida State sports is the transfer portal. We're seeing your engagement with portal stories and portal videos here on the channel, and we're going to talk about that at the outset. But Ira, good evening. How are you tonight?
I'm good, Tom. How are you, man?
I'm hanging in there, man. Doing all right. Interested to see if Florida State is going to be looking at the import market a little bit here for the transfer portal. A lot in the outgoing market right now. You can find a video on Warchant TV after you're done watching the Smash tonight where Ira and Jeff Cameron talked today on the JCS. I did want to revisit some of those things for those of you who are evening watchers of the channel. Florida State now has, let's see, in the transfer portal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, looks like 6 players since the spring window opened, all on the way out, Ira. We're going to play a game that you suggested today. We're going to start the Smash with a game called Blank Alarm Fire for the significance of departures here. And we'll start in reverse order, meaning today's announcement, offensive lineman Terrence Ferguson, has decided that he's going to enter into the portal. He was with Florida State for 1 full season, transferring in from Alabama, interior offensive lineman. He's going to be entering the portal. And so, Ira, do you think this was expected? And category 1, 2, 3, 4, what do you say about TJ Ferguson?
Man, I don't know that it was unexpected. Mike Norvell and Florida State's coaches, Gus Malzahn, they talked about a bunch of offensive linemen during the spring. I don't remember hearing a whole lot about TJ Ferguson. And obviously he played last year. He started 7 games, which I'd kind of forgotten. I think, to be honest with you, I think I tried to block out a lot of what happened in between August and December of 2024. So I think I forgot that he started 7 games. Pro Football Focus was not a big fan of Mr. Ferguson. I think he was the lowest graded player on the entire offense, one of the 2 or 3 lowest graded players on the team. I think I initially probably would have said this is a 2 alarm because he is a guy that's played a lot of college football. He's been on campus he's been at Florida State for 1 year. He was at Alabama for 3 years before that. He actually started a game for Nick Saban. He started 7 games here last year. But looking at those PFF grades, man, and thinking back to that offensive line, I might be going back to a one alarm. I feel like you're going to be able to replace TJ Ferguson pretty easily in the portal.
Yeah, initially when I heard the announcement, I was wondering if this might be something where they had a tough conversation. Herb Hand, Mike Norvell said, look, we've got some guys that are younger players that might be in that rotation ahead of you. Last year, just watching him play when he came in for certain drives, and they had line changes at certain points last year. And when he came in, I thought the spring showcase was his best showing. I'll put it that way. I think he did pretty well at left guard in the spring showcase because beyond that, Richie Leonard was the better of the 2 SEC offensive linemen that Florida State brought in last year. There was a drop off. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then you bring in, one of, I guess, likely a candidate at left guard is Adrian Medley, who came in from UCF. So now, and you've got a couple other guys that have been developed somewhat in the program. So, yeah, I think you got a lot of options there. I don't know that it's one you have to go fill, but maybe for depth purposes, you may feel like you need to get another body.
Next up on the list is at wide receiver, where Florida State was busy sending wide receivers out into the world of college football last week.
Be free.
Be free. Yeah. We did a video on this one over the weekend. It was released yesterday on the channel. This is Jaylen Brown. This is a dismissal / portal entry for Florida State. 1, 2, 3, or 4. What say you, Ira?
Man, we should have done 1 to 5 because I feel like he's a 3.
Okay. All right. We can retroactive it. Does that mean TJ's still a 1, or does that bump him up to a 2?
1.5.
1.5.
No, maybe still a 1, but not yet.
I agree with you. If I can get weighted into the system, it's a 1. The offensive lineman. Okay, Jaylen Brown, you put at a 3.
Yeah, I'd put it at 3 because he does have speed, and that's undisputable. He's one of the fastest receivers they have. We saw it in practice. There were times last year early. One of the things that got us excited in preseason camp last year was DJ Uyunglele hit Jaylen Brown with some deep shots in practice, where Jaylen Brown got behind the secondary, and you could see that speed. It didn't translate to the field. He had 8 catches. You thought maybe this spring, new coaching staff, new system, it would come. Seemed like maybe it was coming, some hints of it, and then he gets dismissed from the team. So it'd be hard to say it was much more than that for a guy that's only caught 8 passes last year, and I'm not sure exactly how much he would have played this season.
I'm entirely biased on this one. I didn't put that into the video over the weekend because I felt like it was more newsy, but this is a 2 at best.
Okay.
Now, Mike Norvell maybe was speaking to consistency and growth, but here's why I'm biased. I watched him try to block, and it just made me bad. And it's not his fault. I think they were playing a little bit of roulette of who's blocking for whom, because you would never have Hakeem behind Jaylen Brown. At least you wouldn't think in a bubble screen look, but they sure as hell did. And Jaylen either turned it down or was not very good at it with consistency last year. So
I guess, you're probably right. I'm gonna stick with 3 just because, again, you can't coach speed. And they don't have a ton of it, so I'm going to still go with a 3. But the middle ground, 2.5 between us, is probably where it needs to be.
Hakeem Williams, not necessarily in the speed department, although he did show at least a couple of bursts there in his Florida State career. But the size department, most certainly, Florida State loses out here. He, at times earlier in his career, showed a willingness to be a blocker on the perimeter. And then last year in fall camp, before he went down with his injury, Mike Norvell spoke about it openly. I think everybody observed it and saw that Hakeem was starting to at least play with more consistency and emerge. But then it, kind of torpedoed from there, Ira. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 for Hakeem Williams. We hardly knew ye, even though you were here for 2.5 years.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a 3 just because of the size. From a production standpoint and from what his I'm no offense, Hakeem, I guess it doesn't matter now, you're leaving, but I didn't think the upside was as high as a lot of people did. As the measurables suggest, I just didn't see a lot of natural pass catching ability, the ability to go high point the ball, to win 50-50 balls. I don't remember seeing him win many 50. Maybe you remember more than I do from practice. I just don't remember seeing him win a lot of 50-50 balls. And we didn't see it in the one practice that was open. He had an opportunity to and didn't do it. So I'll go with the 3 again, just the raw potential in terms of size. And the other part of him that's probably underrated or maybe it's overrated, depends on how you see it. Like, I think he's one that some people in the fan base are mad about because he was highly rated, and now they're turning that into, here's another guy Mike Norvell couldn't develop or couldn't turn into what he should have been. So from that standpoint, maybe I'm grading it up to a 3. How about you?
No, I agree in that. On that front, it's hard to know how much he was failed and how much it's on him. Because when you have a coaching change and a coordinator change, even though Mike Norvell is still there, I mean, do you think somebody would have gotten something? Would Miami or would have Alabama or LSU have gotten something more out of him to this point in his career? It's an unfair question, but I think that's what fans wonder. And I remember when he was a true freshman, Ira, and I was in group text with my buddies, and they were just saying, "Hey, is he looking good?" Because everybody wants to know about the new Corvette that comes on campus. I said, Vandravius Jacobs is looking good. I don't know what to tell you about Hakeem, but Vandravius Jacobs is looking good.
And then last year it was Luane McCoy that was kind of standing out.
Yeah.
So,
Well, to Kurt's point here, and I'd probably have him as a 3 as well, but as far as development goes, let's see what Tim Harris can do with these kids. One thing you could say about this, Kurt, is that he had a full camp with Hakeem, and still it went down this path. So that's not a great look either. At the receiver position, one more, Jordan Scott, and this literally is we hardly knew ye. Probably a 1. Am I assuming correctly here? All right.
Yeah, 1.
All right. Trevor Jackson, 1, and then Jalen Early, offensive lineman, another guy who sneakily started a half dozen games last year for Florida State. Alex Atkins talked him up every single camp like he was the one that was going to be the breakthrough player. 1 through 5 for Jalen Early.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go with a 2. Just because you're right. Alex Atkins did talk him up. He was a pretty highly regarded recruit, came from a really good program in Duncanville. I go back to the first practices when he first got here. There were some things, some some butting of heads between, Atkins and Early, and just, you could tell he was not one of those guys who was just ready for college. It's a discussion we've had a little bit on the message boards lately. It was particularly about Jordan Scott. Sometimes guys get to a school like Florida State and it's just not anything they've been accustomed to before. They're not used to the way they're being pushed at a school like that. Some guys, it takes a little time to turn around. Some guys, they never do. Jalen Early, we thought was beginning to, but then when he got on the field at times, you just didn't see a whole lot. So it's hard to say that, he was really figuring into the plans. Again, maybe another depth piece. But yeah, I'd say probably in the 2 range.
Darren and his comment here, all these wide receiver departures open the door for Danzy and Lucas to get on the field more. No doubt there's opportunity here. And that's where, had they had a scrimmage on Saturday, would have been a first opportunity for, at least after a couple of departures, for some receivers to step up. And that would be Mekhi Danzy, Jalen Lucas, who's going to be a Swiss Army knife. And then Kurt says Javon Boggs seems to be the surprise of the spring. I'd like to see what he can do when he gets a chance. I think that's looking forward without going, making this too much of a segment, Ira. In the fall, that's one of the questions here is whoever they bring in from the portal and then what young player is really going to emerge in fall camp ahead of Alabama. That's going to be an interesting storyline to cover as we get into August.
Yeah, and I think this next, 4 months is going to be huge for that position in particular because, that's not a position where you have to have all 11 guys on the field to work on. Receivers and DBs can be working every day out there by themselves. They can go back and talk to their position coaches and get new, they can have other experienced receivers come out with them and coach them. We saw back, a couple of years ago, some of the big time Keon Coleman and some of those receivers helping the younger receivers because they really need Javon Boggs, who I think we expect to be in the rotation this fall. We need him to have 4 more months like these last 3 months. You need LaWayne McCoy to really, once he gets fully healthy, it sounded like he was getting back to full speed towards the end of spring camp. He needs to have a huge few months. Elijah Moore needs to have Cam Fryer, BJ Gibson. Like they have a lot of young, talented receivers that these next few months are going to be huge for them. And then if you go get 1 or 2 from the portal, they don't have to be superstars. I think you feel like you might have a couple superstars already in the roster, Deuce Robinson, Squirrel White. But you've got to get, you've got to get real quality production out of that next group of backups.
Just a quick question on Cam Fryer. I think we know the story for most of these young receivers, but Cam obviously was hurt, Cam Fryer last year. What's the latest that you've heard around spring camp? Is he getting back up to full speed? Is he already at full speed? Where's he on his journey back to competing at a normal pace?
Yeah, I think he's still catching up to his group. Now, that's unfortunate, but the guys like LaWayne McCoy and BJ Gibson, those guys that came in last year and actually played last year, Cam went down in camp. Like he had that procedure done in camp. He was gone. Like he didn't do anything that entire fall. He came back. I think he was maybe a little bit limited early, but then he's come back in spring and had good moments. I think he's a nice player. I think he can be a really nice player in this offense, especially maybe again the kind of control passing game. But he's got pretty good speed as well. But yeah, I think he can be a factor, but he's got to catch up. And he lost that time. The one time, Mike Norvell, I asked him about like how did Camden use that time off, and he kind of made a comment like, I've actually been talking to him about that. I understand you're not playing, and I'm sure he was down. Man, you come to Florida State, your dad's Matt Fryer, you've been dreaming your whole life to go to FSU. You come in, you have to get a procedure done in camp. You miss your whole first year. Now it's like it's hard. It's just hard emotionally to use that time wisely. And I think that probably was a challenge a little bit. But now I think he's back in the swing of things. And from all things, it sounds like he's catching back up, but he does have to make up for lost time.
We're going to take your questions here on the Monday Smash in a little bit. Again, this program is presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, and we'll speak on Russ in a moment as well. But now that more of you have filed in, we do want to address what happened at Florida State since we last spoke here on this program, on the Smash. And in short, this is a community, a university and a community in Tallahassee that is still in pain. And our hearts are with everybody at Florida State who's been affected directly or indirectly by the tragic shooting that took place last Thursday on campus at Florida State. There is some normalcy that is returning to Florida State athletics. There's an article available right now on warchant.com. 4-star offensive lineman visited Florida State today after they had canceled recruiting visits for the weekend. On campus, Florida State was able to secure a visit there. You can find it in the chat right now for Warchant subscribers. Florida State baseball returns to the Diamond tomorrow. If you haven't heard, there's a time change there. It begins at 5 p.m. against Stetson tomorrow night. That game is now available on ACC Network. So we are returning to some semblance of normalcy. I have to imagine that is going to be an emotionally charged atmosphere at Hauser, certainly before first pitch tomorrow on campus. But Ira, you have a personal connection and a family connection to what happened last week. And I'd like you to speak on your experience of what that was like. Sad as it and scary as it was as a parent, I can't imagine what it was like to be in your shoes.
Yeah, well, fortunately, my daughter Alexa is a senior at Florida State. She's graduating next month. Yay, Alexa. Good work. She was not on campus at the time. She lives across the street from campus back kind of off the strip. And so fortunately she wasn't there. But, even then, I mean, she was shaken up by it. And last night she came over and spent the weekend with us at the house. And even last night she was we were having a discussion about should she go to class today. Florida State, I think, handled it as about as well as you could. They started classes back up today, but it was all optional. She said every teacher she has basically told them nothing's going to be graded this week. Like this was going to be the week before final exams. In fact, I think in her classes, they basically used other grades as the final exam. So for all intents and purposes, this is not going to be a grueling study week as it might normally be. And so I think, so she was debating whether to even go, and she ended up going. And I think she was really pleased that she did because, it was nice to see her friends. It was nice to see the friends in class. She was real concerned about, one of her friends who lives on campus and has to walk by the Union everywhere she's going. And, the Union's still not open. They've got it closed indefinitely now after the incident. So, but, she has to walk past it to and from her dorm every day. And so she was worried about her friends. But she said today was actually good. And they actually Zoomed the kids who didn't want to come back to campus. They actually Zoomed them into the classes, and it was good for them. And so, again, there was a lot of concern last night. It sounds like the police presence on campus was huge, which I'm sure gave some comfort as well. And again, just our hearts are with everybody, and just glad that, like you said, maybe day by day there'll be some return to normalcy for the people that can. Some people, it's going to take a lot longer than that.
I'm sure it will. This is I can't imagine what it would have been like to be a student at that time, because you walk back on campus, it just doesn't look the same. And obviously those are for the lucky students who weren't involved in the worst of it. But yes, we are thinking of all of you at Florida State, and we hope that maybe coverage of sports might give you a bit of a distraction, and certainly tomorrow's game at Dick Hauser Stadium might do that as well. Again, that's going to be on ACC Network. Ira, you mentioned it today. This is not being trite. This is just the function of what happened over the weekend. Florida State did cancel visitors coming on campus recruiting-wise. 2026 kids that they were trying to secure, summer visits, official visits, firm up plans, get into the top 6 lists and top 3 lists for a lot of these kids. They've got work to do on the trail. They were able to bring in one offensive lineman today for a visit, but they've got a little bit of extra work for themselves now because of campuses effectively shutting down over the weekend.
Yeah, and again, a lot of the recruiting process now is done so much earlier. Back in the day, even 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, the recruiting process really kind of got going in May and June, July. Then you had the official visits a lot of times during the football season, and then they would be connected with the game weekends. Kids would commit maybe going into the winter months, and then you try to hold on to them until February. A lot of guys would hold on, but now everything's backed up. The early signing periods in December. The official visits now, most of them are happening in the summer. And the way you lock in those official visits during the summer is by getting kids on campus from January to April to really kind of get them in coming back close to your program and then set up those official visits. And yeah, they've done a lot of that legwork. But there were still some guys that they really were hoping to have on campus this past weekend to kind of finalize things for those official visits. And, unfortunately, they had no choice. I mean, they didn't have any other option. They had to cancel those visits. obviously the kids, a lot of the players that were going to come into town posted things on social media about thinking about Florida State. And, it's certainly not something anybody's going to hold against them, but, it is an opportunity that, that they may not get again, especially it would have been a scrimmage environment. Maybe players at your position do really well. You just never know how those things work out. But they did, like you said, they had a 4-star offensive lineman, Kamari Blair from Tennessee, was on campus today. We just put up a story. Michael put up a story basically about him now looking to set up an official visit to Florida State. And, they're trying to make up some ground with him. And, this recruiting process is much more condensed than it used to be. So, they just have to get on it.
Well, and obviously this is something that also the results in the fall are going to help the 2026 class, because you can sell new coordinators and new position coaches, but they do need to see something. And that's where also, to your point, a scrimmage would have helped. They're also looking to get transfers on campus. In theory, sometimes the transfer portal process is very quick. Kid enters the portal. They have a do not contact tag, and then they just immediately magically, without seemingly talking to anybody, decide to sign somewhere else. I believe they call it in the NFL the legal tampering period. In college football, it's just called Monday. So that's what Florida State is aiming to do here. But I do want to ask, Ira, just your thoughts on the incoming front for Florida State. Maybe we'll play the same game. 1 alarm to 5 alarm fire. Are you thinking to yourself, all right, well, they have more time. This is only about entering the portal, this window that's open. It's open till Friday for football players to enter. Or are you starting to poke Florida State with a stick and saying, are you going to move here? Are we going to do anything? Where are you on this when it comes to adding players in the portal?
Yeah, I mean, I think you always get impatient with this, especially as you see other players, as you said, going in the portal one day, signing somewhere the next day. Matt actually mentioned to me, Matt Lasser, who works for us, mentioned to me on Sunday that he felt like there were some receivers that went in the portal recently that Florida State was kind of getting involved with, but those guys were making decisions pretty quickly at a time where Florida State was in the middle of this tragedy. And again, that's not we're not going to wring our hands about it. There's nothing anybody could do, but it's just, the reality of the situation. But, as usual, Tom, me, I'm a little bit more wait and see. Yep. I think when you look at the situation Florida State's in right now, I don't think they're in a win. They're not at a time where they need to go get the big time players at a bunch of different positions, right? I don't think there's any position you love to have. Obviously you love to have a big time defensive end. You love to have a big time safety. You love to have a big time receiver. But I don't feel like this is a window where they've got to throw the net and get a bunch of studs if they can, because they've got that much work to do. I think it's more of a case where they need to figure out who's going to be available, what can they get, and what's it going to cost them. And, I think that they invested a lot of NIL money and commitments to prospects in that December window and that transfers in that December window. So I don't think that they're in a huge buy mode, like just throw everything at it. And I think they're probably wanting to see how's this going to shake out? Because if you watch how they've acted, they've contacted some players in the portal. They've extended a few offers, but it doesn't seem like they're going full force into lining up visits and things like that. So what that tells me is maybe they're wanting to see a better. There's not people they're in love with, and they want to get in, make the offer, make the connection, but maybe see who else shows up over these next few days, because it may be just depth pieces, not necessarily marquee players. That's my vibe on what they're doing. But I understand from a fan standpoint, let's go get some players.
Well, I'll apply a professional fan perspective to this particular issue. There are years when, as a fan of a franchise, you are close to winning it all. And this could be at the trade deadline. It could be free agency. We need to go all in. Maybe your Orioles might be there in the near future.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar, Tom. Maybe should have gone and get an ace. Maybe that's something they should have done in the offseason.
Maybe you'll be dealing with an angry Mets fan in the end of July. And I'll say, come on, guys, we have a $7 billionaire, somebody who's 4 times the worth of Steinbrenner. Go make it happen. And then there are years where you're saying, well, what's that? You're really going to pay that 3-starter $30 million to get you an extra 5 wins to push you to 86 wins? That doesn't seem like an efficient use of the money. So I think there's a balancing act that goes back and forth between that. This is not a year for Florida State where you're trying to push this over the finish line to go 11-1, win the ACC, and get an auto bid into the Invitational. I think this is a year where you're trying to steady the ship. And with how expensive players are, you have to think about that. It sounds like you're weak and you're capitulating, but I think this is in pro sports, it's called being a smart general manager, and I think that's where Florida State probably is right now.
Yeah, and listen, man, these salary caps or whatever we want to call them, especially in the new era, but certainly at the time right now in these last few years, I think sometimes people feel like, okay, well, this player came off the payroll last year, so now you've got that money to spend. Well, this money is it's finite. And so any money you don't spend right now might be money you can apply at a later time, maybe in that December window or whatever. So no, I think you're 100% right. I also think, again, go back to 2 years ago. Most of us, I certainly did not think they were going to become a major player for Keon Coleman. I thought, well, they're already good at receiver. They don't need a Keon Coleman, but I think they had the mindset of exactly what you're talking about. They were kind of looking at the pennant race and thinking, man, Keon Coleman may put us over the top. And so they went and got him, but it wasn't cheap. And they got him, and it was huge and helped them go 13-0. This is not that situation. So I think you're seeing some big-time players coming available. Florida State's not jumping in the market because maybe that's not where they're at right now. And, I think there might be more of a value player just solidifying things than necessarily being one of the biggest players. And again, it's not like they went cheap. It's not like they were the Rays or the Pirates or whatever this whole offseason. They went after a lot of guys on this roster. Deuce Robinson didn't come here just because he liked Florida State. There's a lot of these players that got really good NIL deals.
Yeah, that's fair. And we're seeing it in the chat. We'll run it down for you about Denaz White. That would be a level 1 fire. Spoiler alert for that one, if that is another player that entered the portal. But Florida State, we'll see how active they are on the incoming side. Nobody wants to be the fan of the team that's not in a pennant race, that's not trying to build and push something over the top for a championship. But it's the reality of where Florida State is right now. If you are in a reality where insurance is something that you want to get for more coverage for fewer dollars, well, let's talk to State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. He can cover you throughout the state of Florida, throughout the state of Georgia and Alabama. He's a diehard Nole who's wondering about the transfer portal himself right now. I'm absolutely sure of it. And he has an excellent agency, Ira, that is stationed out of the east coast of the state of Florida, but can help a whole lot of Noles and non-Noles throughout the Southeast if you're watching us here on Warchant TV.
Yeah, if you ever ask yourself whether or not we're telling the truth when we tell you Russ is just like you guys in terms of like diehard Nole, yeah, man, I was on the phone with him for about 45 minutes, I think, this weekend, talking about Hakeem Williams leaving, talking about some of the other departures. And so, yeah, man, he's just like everybody else when it comes to his fandom. But when it comes to insurance, he's got tons of experience. They have a great operation there, really good customer service, backed by State Farm. And again, they have offices over there in Jacksonville. But if you're anywhere in Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, basically Florida State's main recruiting footprint. If you're into Florida State recruiting and you cover it or you follow it closely and you're in any of those states, you certainly could call Russ Voorhis and go to russvoorhis.com. There's the website, and they'll give you all the information you need. You can comparison shop. That's the thing. We're not telling you have to only go with Russ Voorhis, but compare, find out what they can offer, and then know that he's got great customer service and he likes to take care of other Noles. And mention the Smash and mention Warchant if you do reach out. That would be awesome.
That's one thing I can speak to as a customer of Russ Voorhis is speaking with his reps. They'll have a real conversation with you, about, look, you can get that rate. Well, if you can get that rate, then maybe that's the place that you need to go because you fit a certain age demo or you live in a certain zip code. But they'll have that conversation with you. So, again, his website is russvoorhis.com, russvorhis.com if you're listening here on the podcast. We're going to take a quick 15-second break, and then we're going to be talking more about football camp coming to a close, taking your questions. If you have questions for us, please put those in the chat right now. Director Ben Spicer behind the scenes will star those for us. You are watching the Monday Smash, presented by State Farm agent Russ Voorhis.
Contact Russ Voorhis for an auto quote today.
Going a little bit off topic here first, which is to salute the great, the legend, America's grandpa, Lee Corso. Dave Doherty, thank you for being a Warchant Premier member and for giving us this question in the chat. If you want to join Warchant TV as a premium member, just click the button underneath me on the screen where it says join today. Dave says, I forgot to mention this with the JCS earlier. Do you think game day might be at the Bama opener? It's also Lee Corso's retirement. From what I hear, Ira, it's kind of a coin flip because Ohio State's hosting a high-profile game that weekend too, and Brutus was the first bit of headgear that he ever chose before it turned into this thing. So Lee could go to the alma mater, or he could go to the history, the tradition that he has on set. Have you heard anything about that? And wouldn't it be pretty cool if Lee was in Tallahassee for his final broadcast?
It would be awesome. And, listen, man, I think every FSU fan certainly hopes that's the case. And I get it. I heard Corey Naslon talking about it this morning that, maybe the fact that they did announce it is kind of a wink that maybe it will be at Florida State. And I don't know if the more you think about it, I don't know if I buy that, just because no matter where it's going to be, they'd want that out there. I think they don't want Lee Corso to not have a send-off. So, if you do it after the fact, then he never had his send-off. They kind of had a send-off sort of for him. They did like a video tribute to him last season, but they ended up, I think people thought it was the last game or last season, but it didn't happen. So, I do think it would be great if it's Florida State, but I agree with you. It wouldn't shock me if it was there either. I don't know that we're going to get an answer early. I don't know if that's something they have to commit to.
Yep.
But either way, I was thinking about today, just the tributes that are going to be for Lee Corso, and including what we write on the site. I mean, talking to old time Florida State people were here when he was a student athlete. Apparently he had a 1600 SAT, a perfect SAT, apparently just a genius. Also obviously a really good athlete, great personality. I mean, just, it's pretty remarkable that he's one, Florida State's had so many incredible people come through the school and do great things. He's one I don't know if always gets appreciated as much as maybe he should, and hopefully we'll be able to do that no matter whether he's at game day on campus or not. I think there's going to be a lot of tributes for Lee Corso.
SRB says, wait, I thought we hate game day. I'm confused. You don't need to be. This is very simple. Lee is larger than game day. There it is. And this is his last one. You got decades of history here versus a scuffle that we've had the last few years. It's Coach, it's Corso, it's Florida State. This is way bigger than that.
Yeah.
That's really cool, though. I didn't know that about the 1600 SAT. That's phenomenal.
It's according to Vaughn Mancha, who was the AD back in the day. May he rest in peace. But that's what he told me. Yeah.
Use the Sunshine Scantron to get the 1600 score. Florida man in Alabama. Question for Ira: does having FSU football players being arrested prove that the program is back to the tier 1 level of programs? What do you think, Ira? Is that a sign of health for the program?
Man, I don't know. There was a lot of those comments made on social media and on the tribal council. And listen, man, I will say this: if you're going to get the best players, a lot of times, listen, man, they're sometimes you have to take the good and the bad. And Mike Norvell isn't here to hire to sign only choir boys. So, you hate to see anything bad happen, but yeah, it's a reality of any business. I mean, if you're going to hire the best people or the most productive people, sometimes you have to take things that go with it. And unfortunately in college sports, that sometimes comes with it, but hopefully whatever happened, with Jaylen Brown, hopefully he gets it straightened out and doesn't ruin his life because of it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people were making that joke.
Another question from Dave. How many of Warchant's top 40 from 2024 are still here? A lot of wholesale changes this fall. I'm looking at it right now. I'm not going to put it on the screen. Ira, you want to take a guess out of the top 20? How many are still here? Blind guess.
3.
Okay, I got 2. This is good. Excellent television.
I'm going to talk real quick while you count.
Okay.
The other thing that came out to me, I was texting with Aslan and Corey today, the SEC infusion from last year, that was the big storyline. They were getting these guys from the SEC schools, and now the only ones left from Alabama are Roydell, for now anyway. Roydell and Earl Little are still here. Georgia guy's gone, LSU guy's gone, several other Alabama guys are gone. So yeah, man, it's that was a rough offseason acquisition class.
I'm counting 5 in the top 20, and I'm counting 5 in the top 25. I'm going to the 30s. We're at 6. Oh, buddy. This is, yeah.
Well, hey, listen, man, when you go 2-10, you don't want a bunch of those guys back.
That's true.
So
Very good counterpoint. So there you go, Dave. I actually pulled it up. I looked at it, and I'm fighting off vomiting a little bit. So we appreciate the question. Wes the Villages. How's it going, Wes? Yo, Tom and I, are we getting any recruiting talk tonight? What are your overall thoughts on missing the last scrimmage? How does hurt recruiting because it would have been a solid group? Who knows? And we did touch on that a little bit, Wes, but we appreciate the question because it was an opportunity. Had it been a normal week at Florida State, a normal weekend, it seems like those scrimmages, and you saw one with your own eyes, Ira, not that we had access to those in the past, but it seemed like those were no holds barred type events, and you could kind of see the way that they allowed the coaches and players from high schools in the area line the field to watch the scrimmages themselves. It would have been a feather in their cap to be able to host that, I would think. Yeah,
it definitely would have been, like to the point you made earlier, just for, some of these players that were going to come this weekend had not seen this new offense yet. They have not seen Gus Malzahn coach, or they've not seen this new defense under Tony White. And the players that have come throughout the spring, the recruits who have come, have largely, had really positive things to say. I think a lot of people have liked really what they're doing defensively from a scheme standpoint and some of the playmaking opportunities. And then on the offensive side, the way they run the football. On the flip side of that, though, there was a pretty big time recruit who came out with a top 5 today. I think it's Wingo. Yeah, receiver named Wingo, who Florida State had been in the mix for the whole way. He put out a top 5 and Florida State's not in it. And I think, the feeling there is, well, maybe the move to Gus Malzahn's offense, maybe that's one where it hurts you there. And so this is really so much of Florida State recruiting over the next few months is getting these kids on campus, getting them to educated about what they're going to do on offense and defense. And then at worst, getting kids to not commit in June or July and give them a chance in the fall. Because, right now you're just basing everything on what Gus Malzahn's done in the past, what Tony White's done in the past, but what they do here at Florida State. And if Florida State can show that 2-10 was a blip, is really going to be as important as anything. The problem is right now, kids are going to commit this summer, and you're not going to get a chance to probably show that.
Yeah. Kayvon says in the chat, let's see those drinks, boys. It's the smash after all. I'm going desert dry today, Kayvon. I don't know, Ira, what do you have at your beck and call?
It's just water, man. I promise. It doesn't look like it, but I promise this is water in here.
Is that official Baltimore Orioles merchandise, or did you slap a sticker on there?
Slapped a sticker on it, buddy.
I like that. That's way more, because it's got a little bit of gravitas to it that way. We have confirmed, our Matt Lasser confirmed, I see it in our company Slack, that Denaz White will be in the portal officially tomorrow. That's when his name will appear. But Denaz White, a signee from last year's recruiting class, or it might have been 24. I'll take a look at that.
It was last year.
Yeah, last year's class is going to be entering the transfer portal. So a depth piece, potentially a defensive interior. I would think that Florida State was going to head into the defensive line transfer portal anyway. We'll see. We'll keep tabs on that here on Warchant.com and Warchant TV. Grillmaster, I haven't heard anything about that 5-star defensive lineman we got in the high school class. He's referring to Tylon Lee. Florida State was able to flip him late in the process. I believe he was an Ole Miss commit, or at least an Ole Miss lean down the stretch. Did you see anything out of him in the scrimmage of all the freshmen that were mentioned, you didn't hear much about freshman defensive players this camp, Ira. What do you make of that?
Yeah, and Kevin Wynn's another guy that people have asked about. And, again, when I did a story over the weekend just talking about the impact players and, talking about the impact freshmen from the spring. I picked basically 5 freshmen that I thought generated the most excitement, most buzz this spring. And the only defensive linemen I mentioned were Mandrell Desir and his brother, the Desir twins. And, Daryl Desir and Mandrell Desir. And those are the guys that consistently we heard the most about. You would hear something about the other defensive linemen occasionally, but from Mike Norvell to Tony White to Jalen Knighton, or not Jalen, Terrence Knighton, the defensive line coach. Everybody was really excited about the Desir twins. And then when you look at the depth chart, and again, there's 4 more days of this portal. They may lose some other defensive linemen, but Denaz White was not one of the 10 guys I mentioned. Kevin, you're talking about a defensive tackle. It's just a hard position to make much of an impact as a true freshman. Yep. Lee, maybe if he were to be an end, maybe he gets in the mix there. But again, I think unless they lose several of their guys, I think that freshman defensive line class is going to get the opportunity to get bigger and stronger, and you hope to not have to use them too much this year, I think.
I think part of this too, and I'm not sure that we've circled around this. I think we're talking about it. New coaches, new set of eyes on players, new schemes. Some tough decisions need to be made and tough conversations need to be had as it pertains to, is a player a fit under Tony White versus, an Adam Fuller system, or is this player a fit under Gus Malzahn versus Mike Norvell's system, which is not dissimilar, but it ain't the same. That has to be what's going on here as well. Just real conversations, Ira, right?
No, and I think a perfect example is a guy like Dinas White. And I think it was the case with Aaron Hester, who went into the portal earlier today as well. Aaron Hester was a very undersized in terms of frame defensive end in a 4-man front. I don't know how he works in a 3-man front. I mean, listening to Tony White and things we've seen from their defense in the past, he likes versatility. He wants big ends who can also shift inside occasionally and athletic enough tackles that can shift outside. He wants to be very unpredictable in terms of, okay, those, who's on the field, but you may not know exactly how we're going to use them. And again, Dinas White was I felt like a signee for a 4-man front nose guard. Maybe after watching the spring, he either doesn't have the athletic ability to be what they want him to be, or he didn't feel comfortable in this system and with the new coaching staff. Odell Higgins, who signed him, is still here, but he's not the main position coach. So, yeah, it's, again, you don't want to be losing tons of high school signees just because you do have to develop players. But, in terms of an impact this year, I don't think that's one that's not going to hurt.
I totally agree. For context, too, as a recruit, his On3 industry ranking, he was the 88th defensive lineman in the country and national player number 938 in his recruiting class. Garrett asks, how many Noles get drafted, do you think? Yes, the NFL draft on Thursday for round 1. It continues on through Friday and Saturday. I've got a number, Ira. I think it ain't going to be 10, but what do you think this year?
I hadn't been thinking about it too much lately. I know we're going to run some stuff here in the next couple of days leading up to the draft, but just going through them. Azaria is obviously going to be probably, if not first day, then second day. I feel like that's pretty certain. I think Josh Farmer is going to be maybe second day, possibly. I think he really helped himself at the Senior Bowl and in some of the workouts, and I think he's definitely in the mix. I think Fentrell Cypress is somebody we don't think about a whole lot, but I bet you he gets drafted probably on the third day, but I definitely think he gets drafted. Maybe Fitzgerald gets drafted. It's hard. It seems like they draft kickers maybe a little bit more than they used to. You would know more than I do because you pay more attention to the NFL.
I think getting the combine invite is a good indicator that there's at least, draft potential. It was strange to me that Mastro didn't. I don't know what's going on there.
To clarify real quick, I didn't know this until this year, and Ryan Fitzgerald's dad had kind of explained it to some of us on the message board, that they'll bring in other kickers and punters before the other kickers perform in the dome. So they're up there, they get to meet the coaches, they get to meet scouts and spend some time. And apparently Mastromano did get invited to that. He just didn't get to participate in the main one that's going to be on the NFL Network. So I don't think he's out of the realm, but yeah, probably a cut below for whatever reason where Fitzgerald was.
He was brilliant. So I think the over/under would be 4.5.
Who did I not mention?
Well, Fitz, so you got Farmer, you got AZ and Cypress, and then the two specialists. I think that's probably your 5 leading candidates. I don't know that any of those linebackers are going to get drafted. I don't know about anybody else in the defensive backfield. Dave in Bardstown. Tom, no spoiler alert for my cousin Vinny. I haven't seen it yet. Oh, thanks, Dave. That's a reference to the video back during the weekend. The Buick Skylark. That's all you got to know, Dave. No spoilers there. And go watch the movie. It's 30 years old. Please do.
I'm sure it holds up really well.
We'll go with 4.5 for the official smash over/under for NFL draft picks this week for Florida State. Troy Knoll is asking, appreciate you being a Warchant Premier member, Troy Knoll. Tom and I, are players leaving the program due to losing faith in Coach Norvell? I'll start with this one. It wouldn't be stunning to me if they've lost faith in football after going 2-10.
That's lost faith in humanity.
That's a toughie at Florida State. I don't think you sign up and get on a plane to go to Dublin thinking that you're going to win 2 games between then and New Year's. I think this is due to real conversations being had. I think some are being, for lack of a better term, asked to explore their options. So there might be some cases of people losing faith in the staff and being failed by previous members of the staff. Troy, I'm not saying that's not part of the equation, but I think there's a little bit of A, a little bit of B going on here. What do you think, Ira?
Yeah, no, I think for the most part, it's situations. It's like coaching changes, not fitting in. You've been on campus for a long time, whatever it is. But the only player that I would think I potentially put in that category, and I don't necessarily think it's necessarily lost faith in Coach Norvell, but it's just this has not gone well for him, might be Hakeem Williams. And, I was talking to somebody around the program this weekend, not one of the coaches, but just somebody part of the program. And they know Hakeem really well, and everybody loves Hakeem as a person. And they were saying they felt bad for Hakeem because, he didn't get developed in high school. He went to a really bad high school football program. Then he comes here and he's in that receiver room, and now Ron Dugan's has been fired, partially because of not developing those players at that position. So if he wasn't developed, if he didn't get a good experience those first 2 years, there's, you could certainly see him feeling like this isn't what I signed up for. And then also the offense changing. I know he was from what I understood, he was very close to Luke Kromenhoek. And one of the things we heard last season was that he and Luke were there was talk during the season that those two were talking about maybe leaving together, and they just things weren't going well. This has not been the experience Hakeem Williams hoped for. And now you change offensive systems again, and now he might be getting passed over. So that's the only one I would say might fall in that ballpark, but I don't even blame Mike Norvell for that because I still don't know that Hakeem's ever going to be what we all thought he could be.
It'll be, yes, but I think all Noles are going to watch that career and just kind of peer and open just to see,
Sure.
is he doing better? God, please. You don't root against the kid, but at the same time, you're rooting to believe that your evaluations are on point. And like, did we get it wrong out of high school? Did we get it wrong to let him go, or both? Oh no, that's one of those things where if he goes into a different uniform and he starts to produce, people are just going to hang their heads a little bit. But we wish all the kids the best that do depart. Dave asks if Ira, when you talk to Link next, you can ask him what's been like for the team the last week and if he feels like they're ready for Clemson. I can't imagine that is a normal set of circumstances or one that he has precedent for by any stretch, Link Jarrett, to manage, his clubhouse last weekend and then obviously get him ready to play really important baseball games the upcoming weeks, because they got Louisville this upcoming weekend, which is a humongous test for improving the RPI and stating their case, Ira, to be a national seed.
Yeah, Link's so insightful, not just about coaching or strategies or fundamentals in baseball, but also just about life and things like that, and what things his team is dealing with. If you watch Link Jarrett's videos, you'll see what I'm talking about. He's always, he really thinks about what he's going to say, and he puts a lot of thought and effort into it. So yeah, I'm curious to see. We will definitely ask him that tomorrow after the game. Hopefully it goes well for the team and that, they're all in a good frame of mind afterwards. But yeah, that's going to be a big topic of conversation. And again, I mentioned it today on the JCS. I mean, I really hope that it's just, maybe not cathartic, but maybe it's just a good moment for people to come together and, support each other and just see familiar faces again at the ballpark. So I'm looking forward to the game and definitely looking forward to talking to Link afterwards.
Spartan Noles 71's Ralph out in Hawaii asked Tom, Ira, what contact are coaches, GAs, or analysts allowed to have with players until fall camp starts? A hell of a lot more than they used to. That's the answer. They can actually be present, Ira, for some degree of workouts. Now, I don't know the nuance of the rule in terms of instruction, but they can actually be out there and be present for what used to be known as player-only workouts. Right. And that's a big deviation than in the last few years, or from previous decades, I should say, to the last few years.
Yeah, those rules have gotten more and more relaxed the longer we go. It wasn't, I don't know, I can't remember how many years ago. It wasn't that many years ago that they started letting the coaches just be out there. Then they let them be out there and actually have a ball. They can't have a football, but maybe they'll have something. There's things that they can do, but it's not really like a practice, but it's pretty close to a practice. And then they meet all the time. And, listen, man, it's a full-time job especially now that they're getting paid. There'll be constant contact with the players and coaches. They do not go home very often or very long anymore. And, then there are formal workouts with the strength coaches. And so, yeah, it's a continuation of the season now. It'll be full go. They'll probably get a week or so off here for finals, maybe a week or two. And then when they get back, I think early the first week of May or so is when the high school kids that signed in December but didn't come in January, a lot of those kids will be here at the start of May, and also some of the other transfers who signed. Because there's probably, I can't remember the exact number, but it might be 10 more players that signed in December that weren't here in the spring. So those guys will be here starting in May as well.
Speaking of newcomers, a lot of those will be freshmen. We had quite a few freshmen in spring camp. Ray Wilmer over on Facebook asks, Ira, most surprising freshman performance in the spring? I guess that would be most surprising level of chatter for freshmen in spring, in addition to the scrimmage that you were able to see.
Yeah, I don't know if I could say most surprising because a lot of it's based on what you expected coming in. I think the most impressive player in the spring, I think, has got to be Javen Boggs. It's just been a steady stream of people very excited about what that guy can do. And I think it's great for him to be in a position where they need somebody to step up. And it's a position where freshmen can play. Jimbo back in the day used to say, the further away you are from the football when you line up, the easier it is to play as a freshman. And that's receivers, it's DBs. It's harder the closer you are to the ball, linebackers, linemen, trenches, quarterbacks. And so, I think it's perfect situation for him to be able to be a big player, but it's not a huge surprise. I think Kevin Sperry might be the biggest surprise just because, they love him. And it's not just the coaches, it's players. The way people light up when you talk about Kevin Sperry, I think, listen, man, people love not comparing him to Jameis, but the last, there haven't been that many freshman quarterbacks that create this kind of buzz that he has. And it just gets everybody excited because they think, okay, well, he might not be ready right now. He may not be ready in August or September, but this is a guy we want to have in the program. A lot of the Florida State quarterbacks they've signed, man, going back probably 10 years have not created this kind of buzz. So he'd probably be my most surprising. What about you?
Yeah, to me, not surprising, but glad to hear it. Chase Lofton, because on signing day, Mike Norvell talked about him as the top priority. He's like, that was the number one guy we wanted, was Chase Lofton. I thought, wow, the tight end from Middle America? Okay. Well, he comes down and Mike continued the praise from signing day post-practice at least 2 or 3 times in his press conferences, saying he's every bit of what we thought he was going to be. So that's a positive development for freshmen. But I think for me, the surprise would be Shamar Arnaud. Heard enough buzz about him just because I'm going to play the role of Joe Public. It's a nice flip from Auburn, but it is a 3-star prospect. So you're not thinking that you're snagging, a top 5 defensive back who's a can't miss 3-year player. And I'm not trying to set expectations, Ira, and I know you know that I'm not trying to do that he's going to be a starter for Florida State this fall, but they really like what they got in that kid. And it seems like he's a natural fit into Tony White's system. It's a good get for them.
No, it definitely was a good get. I know Patrick Surtain and that staff were super excited when they brought him in, and we've seen it. The scrimmage we were at. I mean, he showed what he is. I mean, he's a real football player, real talented kid. I think the probably the concern with him, and it's concern with sometimes different freshmen, is the maturity level in terms of like, okay, this is how you have to operate in our program in terms of. You got to be early to things. You got to be on time. You just all the things that, he's a kid with a big personality. I think he's got a lot of swag to him. And, I think the question was like, okay, how quickly is he going to conform to, and there's a lot of players on this team who, I think Edwin Joseph is a guy that probably, there were conversations in the program a couple of years ago about him. How quickly is he going to adapt to, more professional college lifestyle? And, if Arnaud could do that, they thought he could make that kind of transition, and it sounds like he has. So, yeah, man, he's super talented, no question about it.
Let's see. We'll get one more from football, and there's a baseball question before we round it out tonight on the Monday Smash. Make sure to head over to warchant.com and subscribe if you haven't yet. It's $1 for your first week. Very busy week upcoming for Florida State. They're trying to catch up on the recruiting front and also the transfer portal front. They're not done yet. During the course of the show tonight, another player entered the transfer portal for Florida State. So if you want all those updates, they're live on the Tribal Council, the Premium Recruiting Board, all the coverage of the goings and the comings in the portal over the next week, in addition to excellent coverage on everything Florida State. It's $1 for your first week. Head over to warchant.com. Scott asks, hey, guys, how many players do you think we pick up in the portal? That's a great question. Let's set an over-under. Ira, I'm going to set a number. You tell me if I'm too light, too heavy, or just right. 3.5. I'm going to say 3.5 players in the portal. What do you think?
I'm going to go over, but it's a good number. I would probably set it at 3.5 or 4.5. But yeah, I think part of it is I do think it looks to me like some more guys are getting processed than maybe we thought, or guys are choosing to leave more than we thought. Because again, there's still 3 or 4 more days in this window where more guys can go out. The other thing is, what's hard to, and this is the part that it's hard to really calculate, because in the old days, you had 85 scholarship roster, and you knew, okay, this is your 85. You got to get to that, and sometimes might be some. There's a guy that you're not sure if they're on scholarship, or maybe they came as a walk-on, but they got put on scholarship. So it was always a little bit gray around that 85 and how firm it was. Well, now it's completely gray, because if this house settlement goes through, which we expect it's going to, the limit's going to go to 105 players, but that also includes your walk-ons. So they've got 30 or so walk-ons on this team that, if you're going to have 85 of the old scholarship players, and then 20 or 25 guys that you had as walk-ons who now are going to be scholarship players under this new world, are you going to have to, if you want to get back to 85, say you lose 8 guys and you want to replace them, you get back to 85, maybe you have to cut some of these guys who were walk-ons, so there's a lot of, we talked to Mike Norvell about this about a week ago, and he said, man, it is so in flux, you just can't. So the unfortunate part of this is the more guys they sign out of the portal, there's going to be some borderline players who were walk-ons right now believe they're going to be on scholarship in the fall at Florida State because it goes up to 105. But if they sign too many, maybe they get left out. So, man, it's hard to pick a number, because it's just, there's so many variables right now, more than have ever been in this sport.
And I think, one of the largest one is how many more dudes exit, how many more players leave, because that drives the number up. And I do want to footnote this. I'm sure the chat, there may have been a couple of pushbacks, but I'm talking about number of players who could contribute in 2025. Like, you might be able to grab a depth player or a rising redshirt freshman. You're seeing that more often than players after 1 year are just hitting the portal. That might be somebody that's a nice multi-year solution for your program. But I'm talking about guys that might make the 2 deep this fall. I'm saying 3, 4, somewhere in there. Thomas Coker asked about baseball. He says, what's the plan to make up the games? There isn't an obvious one, Thomas. They'd have to do some juggling around of the schedule. I can remember years ago, this is the Jameis Winston right field era. Florida State added a game with North Carolina towards the end of the season before they went up to the ACC championship. Because both of them had an opening on the schedule. I don't think they were originally supposed to play each other. That wasn't a makeup game. It was the 2 programs just had an opening.
They each had lost games,
right?
And they were trying to just pick up games anywhere they could. Yeah.
So the one thing I would say, Thomas, is maybe they find something that they share with Virginia. Maybe they find a date if Link Jarrett wants to make it happen with another program, just to get more games. But there's not an obvious candidate, especially unless they wanted to move some games into midweek for exams week, which is it's coming up next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
But even the challenge there is you're pitching, because you don't how these guys all pitch on schedules, and so it's not fair to either team to really pick up add in 1, 2, or 3 more games. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. We will talk to Link about it tomorrow, but yeah, I agree. I don't think there's anything obvious that makes sense right now.
Before we sign off tonight, anything, Ira, that you'd like to specifically promote that's coming up this week, other than the fantastic coverage that everybody has come to expect from Warchant?
No, man. I think it's just we'll see where things hold. The one thing I would say is, again, spring practice is over. At this point, normally we're rolling out our position by position breakdowns. Like, what did we learn this spring? What does Florida State need to do in the portal? It's hard to do that right now because we don't know who else might be leaving. So I don't want to do a story. I don't want Corey or me or Matt to write a story and then find out tomorrow 1 or 2 guys at that position left that we had penciled in. So we're going to wait on that. But those by the time the portal closes at the end of this week, you said it's Friday, right? That's when that's when players have to be in by. If you're going to go in the portal, you have to go in by this Friday. By this weekend, we'll start rolling out those pieces, really looking at the depth charts and what the position breakdowns look like. And there's still time for them to sign players because this deadline only applies to going in the portal. They'll still be signing players probably well into May.
We will keep you all posted here on warchant.com and Warchant TV. If there's breaking news of any kind, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It's absolutely free. If you want to be an extra Premier member, by all means, join the channel as well for extra perks. But the videos, the breaking news, they're always going to be free to you here on Warchant TV. So make sure to hit the like button as well if you enjoyed tonight's show before you head on the way out. And if you are on the podcast feed and you enjoyed the smash, leave us a comment that tells us that we're doing good, or maybe not. But a comment would be appreciated on the podcast feed as well. For Ira Director Ben Spicer behind the scenes, my name is Tom. Thanks to Dave for his contribution tonight. Dave, most generous of you. You didn't have to do that. And our thanks to State Farm agent Russ Voorhis for sponsoring the program as always. Good night, everybody. We'll talk to you next time on Warchant TV. Take it easy, Ira.
Take care.